to history beyond. He has simply closed one book, and perhaps that is the most suitable ending from Orhan. His own life in the story was about preserving a book written by his father and adding new pages without erasing the old one. The series now asks the audience to do something similar. We must accept the pages that say final, but we do not have to treat it was the dead for the entire historical imagination. The road from Artugal to Osman and from Osman to Orhan has reached its official destinations. Beyond that destination stand and others road still unnamed. It may lead to Celebi, Mehmed Murad and other Ottomans age or a completely different epic. Until the productions speak again, the honest position is patient. For now, the final picture of Krulus Orhan is clear. A ruler stands between two armies and rules to fight according to his enemy plans. A city prepares for while family struggles with love, belief, blame, grief, and loyalty. A sister's mourner, sometimes someone who became a thread. A woman waits for news of the man she loves. A commander receives his name back after a false judgment. A dynasty look forward to new targets. The times moves on. The empire breaks, and a young prince asks whether resurrections can happen again. The answer is not given directly. It does not need to be. The entire 12-year journey has already answered it. As people rise, when courage is joined with purpose, when memory becomes responsibility, and when the next generation is ready to carry what the last generation could not finish. This is why the final update should not be turned into a false promise for a sad complaint. It should be understood as a moment of changes. Krulus Orhan did not receive the long life many viewers expected, but it completed an important headover inside the larger saga. It carried the flag from the founders to the rulers who had to make the state wider, smarter, and the more stable. Its final episode then carried that flag centuries forward toward a generation that could need to rebuild unity after disasters. The series may have ended early, yet its final idea was large. Every achievement is temporary unless another generation understands its meaning. Every victory needs protections, every state needs reunions, every family must choose whether inherited power will become service or pride. Orhan answers was reserve, planning, courage, and movement toward a new horizons. That is the image that Finer wanted to preserve, not a ruler roasting after successors, but a rulers already looking beyond the last battlefield, not a completed dream, but a duty moving from one pair of hands to another, and that is where this first section and at the point where the official series closes, but the historical questions remain alive. Orhan's journey from a questions commanders to the rulers of a state. The story of Kurulus Orhan becomes more meaningful when we stop looking only at its final battles and returns to the difficult road that brought Orhan to that position. At the start of this chapter, Orhan was not standing as a unquestioned sultan with complete control over its people. He was still living under the great shadow of Osman Bey. He had courage, experience, loyal soldiers, and the dream of capturing Bursa, but he had not yet proved to every Bey that he was ready to carry the whole state. Some respected him because he was Osman's son. Some trusted him because they had been him fight. Others believed that his fought youth made him impatient. A few powerful men were waiting for him to make one mistake so that they could take his place. This was the real beginning of Orhan struggles. The first had to conquer doubt before he could conquer cities. Cruise Orhan officially began its television journey on October 29, 2025, and eventually ended with episode 26 on June 10, 2026. During those 26 episodes, the series moved Orhan from the position of a tested heir to positions of Sultan Orhan, the ruler responsible for protecting and expanding the stage. The official ATV material described Orhan as the hope of and the leaders of coming holy. Compassion was also presenting Sahinsas as a powerful tradition by two did not easily accept new ideas. That the difference between the two men became one of the most important conflict of seasons. Orhan's first difficulty was not a lack of bravery. Nobody serious believed that alone was no longer enough. Osman has spent years building a political uh, around the key tribe. The land had grown, the number of enemies has increased, and every decision now affected for more people there. Before Orhan could not behave only like an ops who saw dangers and immediately attacked it. He had to think about food supplies, roads, castles, spies, rivals, bailings, and the Byzantines courts and the anger of commanders with his own side. He also had to make decisions while knowing that every failure would be used as proof that he was not ready to success his father's. This pressure made his early step back important when a young leader's success in every situation. The audience has no reasons to believe that he has not learned anything. Everything Orhan needed to experience moment when his plans were questioned, when commands has moved to. These were not simply humiliations written to create trauma. They forced him to unfinish the understand the difference between believing that he deserved leadership and conceiving others that they deserve it. A title can be given by a father, but authority must be accepted by soldiers. By families and the poor peoples who will carry the cost of rulers' decisions. Hinsas enter his struggles as someone who believed experience and traditions gave him the right to command. He was not introduced as a weak man hiding behind others. He has worried a woman's name and confidence in his understanding of the old ways. This made him a useful rival for Orhan. He had been foolish from the beginning. Defeating him would have proven very little since us represented a real question. Should relationship remain with men who had followed the established path for years, or should it move toward a younger ruler who wanted to change military and political method? The problem was not that traditions had no value. The problems began when Sahinsa's treated traditions as the personal property and used it is protected his positions. At first, his disagreement with Orhan could not remain political. A state can survive strong men disagreeing about strategy. In fact, honest disagreement may protect our rulers from bad decisions. The dangers appear when our commander begins to care more about defeating its rival than defeating the enemy. Sainza slowly closed that line. His anger over long commands becomes stronger than is concerned from unity. Instead of helping Orhan correct mistake, he started waiting for Orhan to leave fate. Then he waiting for working against him. This was the beginning of moral fall. He will strike about honor, customs, and the futures of the peoples, but those who increasingly covered our personal wounds. Episode 5 showed that the after collapse of the Bursa tunnels, foolish and few days but escape while Sahinsa's struggles to accept begins. Removed from command, Orhan, now facing one of the first major threats after receiving authority, turns his attentions toward Yashars as also begins applying pressure toward Iznik. The episode plays several enemies around him at once. Flavius prepared as assassination attempt. Sainzas carried hidden angers, and the Byzantine front remained dangerous. Orhan's response to Yashars revealed the emotional side of his leadership. He did not see land only a line on a map. Yashars was connected to blood sacrifice and the need to answer for fallen warrior. When he planned to take it with abrasions and controls, he was trying to prove two things. First, he wanted to show that the new command would not forget missiles. Second, he needed to show his soldiers that he could turn memory into actions. Warriors will follow a leader into dangers when they believe he remembers the name and loses beyond the compassion. A commander would treat the dead as number may control an army for a time, but he cannot hold its hearts. The most toward Iznik and was different. Others carried the weight for an old wound. Iznik represents the next stage of um, expansions by placing both goals close together. The story showed Orhan learns how a state must look backward and forward at the same time. It must answer all attacks, but it cannot spend its entire life taking revenge. It must honor the past without becoming trapped inside it. Orhan political growth depends on its balance. He needs and enough memory to remain loyal to his peoples and enough visions of move beyond their plan. Flavors added and others kind of challenge, unlike Sahinsas who came from within the wider Turkish political world. Flavors represented the anger of the Byzantine side. He was connected to Bursa revenge and the fears that the rising Ottoman's power would destroy. He knew his role was more complex because he was only not only a soldier fighting Orhan from the front. He enters hidden space and uses an other identity and from an emotional connected with Fatma. This meant that the conflict enters Orhan family. A visible enemy can be met with a shield. An enemy will become trusted by someone close to you can pass through every shield. The relationship between Fatma and Flavors made the dangers more painful. Fatma did not fall in love with the full trust of who has. She fell in love with the man he appears to be and with the human qualities she believed she saw in him. Flavius, meanwhile, discovered that his plan could not remain emotionally simple. He might enter the relationship with hidden reasons, but feeling can grow in places where strategy once stood. This does not remove his responsibility for deception. It shows, however, make his choice more dramatic. He was forced to look at women connected the enemy and recognize that he was not the cruel symbols to had imagining for Fatma. The revelation of his identity was not only a romantic betrayal, it was an attack on her ability to her trust her own judgment. When someone lies about his name, purpose, and loyalty, the person who loves his belong to question every shared moment. Was kindness real when the protections planned? Was every word from the trap? This pain is different from ordinary heartbreak from relationship itself. Fatma had to accept that some moment may have contained real emotions while the larger relationship was still built on a lie. This story also tested Orhan as a brothers or rulers may be able to judge a spy according to law, but a brothers but sees the tears of his sisters. These two rules can pull him in different directions. If he acts from anger, he may make a poor political decisions. If may act only as a ruler, his sisters may believe that the state had become more important to him, but his suffering. The seasons repeatedly showed that leadership did not remove Orhan family duties, it made harder. Every family crisis becomes political, and every political decisions entered the family. The Bursa compassion was the point where all these pressures began to turn Orhan into a different man. Bursa was not simply another castle, it had been a long distance, a strategic center, and one of the great goals connected with Osman visions. Orhan's ability to capture its would decide whether he remained as the completing his father's order or became the ruler of a new stage. The official episode 10 summary presented the battles against Hector's army as a turning point and connected offer Orhan victory with the conquest of Bursa. It also placed the Stambrans beside Osman Bey's final illness and death, allowing the happiness on conquest and the grief or as well to arrive together. This combination of victory and death was one of the strongest ideas of the goals that could make the fathers proud, but he had almost no time to enjoy it as a son. He returns to find Osman near the end of his life. He could place the soil of Bursa in his father's hand, yet the could not give him more time. The sense carried the trust that every senior eventually faces the moment when guidance becomes memory. Until then, Orhan could disagree with Osman, seek with approvals, or hope that his father would solve a large crisis after Osman's death. There would be a no longer door to enter the final. Responsibility would stop with Orhan. Osman's death also changes the meaning of every mistake Orhan might make. Before that moment, our futures could still be corrected under his father's authority. After it mistake belonging to the state rulers that there was no longer a difference between Orhan's personal decisions and the directions of Ottoman's power. This is why the death of the founders was more than an emotional scene. It was a political earthquake. People we had obeyed Osman for years now had to decide whether their loyalty would naturally pass off his son's enemies. Also understood that moment of successors as dangerous. Our new rulers may face rebellions, rivals, claims, and foreign attack. Believe because moment believe the state is temporarily weak or Han could not answer that dangers by trying to become Osman. A copy would always appear smaller than the original. He needed to carry his father's purpose whilst developing his own method. Osman's stage and had been the age of foundations. Orhan is determined conciliations, administrations, diplomacy, and larger compassion. The state could no longer act like a small fighting force that survived through the personal courage of the one way. It needed a rulers who could control several fronts and trusted commanders independently manage cities and make agreements with powers he did not fully trust. This is where mud interruptions of Orhan's become important. The character was written as a faster and a more calculating energy than the older founders figures. He often appeared as someone whose mind moved toward the next problem before the current celebration had hidden. This gave him a sense of restlessness, a time that restless looked like impatient, a older's time. It showed the natural behavior of rulers who know that enemies would not allow him to remain comfortable. His Orhan did not rule enough to same heavy presence associated with Osman. He rulers below through motions, direct speech, and the belief that every delay would strengthen the opposition after Bursa. and Osman that the series could begin calling Orhan Sultan not only in a title but in dramatic responsibility. The palace plays part of the earlier tribal atmosphere. Decisions that once happened around a fire now affected a city. Clothing, ceremonies, rooms, guards, and formal meetings all showed that the political world had changed, that yet the people inside the palace still carried the habits, loyalty, and bonds of the tribe. This produced an interesting tension. The state had become larger, but not everyone had emotionally adjusted to that growth. Mulhan Horn stood at the center of the transition. She had lived outside Osman during struggles and now had to watch her own carry the result. Her role was no longer only that for a life wife sporting on a bay. She became a senior woman of the destiny whose judgment could influence Orhan, Nilufars, and Fatma, Helemi, and the political order of the palace. The official caste desperations presented her as the dignity of the state and the main sports of the family and tribe. Molhan's strength comes from memory. Orhan I look at the future, but Molhan remember how difficult the beginning had been. She knew the cost behind every banner and every piece of land. This gave her the right to warn younger characters when pride, jealousy, or anger inherited threatening unity at the same time. Memory could not become complete control. Orhan was now the ruler, and Mulhan had to find the line between guiding her son and allowing him to make decisions she might not personally choose. This is one of the hardest times chooses changes for a powerful and others. The child she protects becomes the man who can overrule her. Niloufar faced another form of transitions. She was Orhan Compassion's, the mother of his son, and a woman shaped by love, belief, and struggles. The official caste profile described her as Orhan first love and heard as Orhan first love heard strengthening through hardship. Her position emotionally first love and her standing for hardship. The opposition beside Orhan looked secure emotionally, yet political reality soon made that security uncertain. A ruling marriage is a growing state cannot remain only a private relationship. A license, successions, and international pressures entered the same rules as love. Nilufar's fear was not simply that Orhan might care for another's woman. Her deeper fear was that the state would slowly take away the life that they built together. Every new title changes him, every compassion placed a political needs above private promises. She had spotted the dream when it was difficult, but now that the dream was becoming powerful, she risked and losing her place inside it. This made her emotional reactions understandable even when some of her choices became harsh. As Porka entered a direct challenge to her sense Nilufar of safety, she was not a weak woman brought into the palace without influence. ATV officials' descriptions presented her as an intelligent and disciplined Byzantine princess with a strong will determined to protect her father and resist Turkish expansions. She therefore arrived with her own political identity. She had been raised in a court, understood power, and did not naturally accept Orhan as her leader. Her connections with him began through conflict rather than simple attractions. This made Orhan and Sporka dynamic, interesting. Each saw the other as dangers, but they also recognized qualities that were difficult to ignore. Orhan saw that Sporka possessed courage and discipline. Sporka saw that Orhan was more than the rough enemy described by the Byzantine side. He could fight, negotiate, protect, and make decisions under pressure. Respect begins to appear inside oppositions. This does not erase their difference, but it made their encounters more unpredictable. The conflict reached its high point around episode 15 when Orhan prepared to fight with his army while Asporka was determined to stop the Ottomans' dream. Orhan also noticed Sainsa's absence from the battlefield and became suspicious. At the same time, Aladdin and Gona faced an attack while traveling towards Germans, placing their unborn child in danger. The episode 7 connected opens war, internal betrayal, and family fears is one stage of the story. The battlefield meeting between Orhan and Sporka was important because it made their later political relationship harder to reduce to romance. They had seen each other as enemies. Prepare to stories the other side plan. Any future understanding would therefore carry the memory of soldiers who had fought around them. This kind of relationship cannot become believable through a few gentle conversations. It requires both characters to accept that the political world is changing and that corporations may protect more life than endless revenge. Sainz's absence during this crisis showed how far he had moved from honest oppositions. A commanders may disagree with the ruler's plan, but despairing when the army needs unity is a different act. Orhan's suspicion was therefore not personal insecurity, it came from observations and partner sciences had lost command, carried resentment, and repeatedly appeared around the moment when Orhan's positions was threatening. Each choice took him closer to open betrayal. Yigit role made Science's fall more painful. A son often sees a father as the first image of strength and trust. Discovering that the father has crossed moral line creates a deep crisis. Yigit had to decide whether to loyalty to his father's meant protecting his actions or spotting him too from causing greater damage. This is not an easy choice in a culture where family to honors crisis create too importance. Speaking against his father's too could look like betrayal, but silence could make him too part of the rogue. Through Yigit, the series asked whether blood loyalty has a limit. The answer suggested by the larger story was yes, family deserve love, patience, and protections, but it cannot become an excuse for injustice. Our rulers who allow powerful families to hide crimes will eventually lose the trust of everyone outside those families. Yet struggles before reflected the same principles Orhan had to apply to himself. The state could not survive it personally. Relationship always stand about trust. Aladdin represented a very different model of service. He was not written as a second Orhan competition for the same form of greatness. His strength came from because planning and a clever political mind. In a weaker story, the two brothers might have been forced into a permanent rivalry of the throne. Krulus Orhan gained depth when it showed that a growing state needed both kinds of ability. Orhan could lead compassion and carry visible authority. Aladdin could help create order through evidence, avoid advice, administrations, and understanding. The attack on Aladdin and Gonka during their journey was therefore not only a threat to a married couple, it was an attack on one of the state's important sporting branches. Their unborn child gave the dangers of futures remaining. The futures of our dynasty is not protected only by the ruler's survival. It can depend on brothers, children's marriage, and the writer's family structures remaining strong enough to prevent a crisis of succession. Konka positions added and others political connections because her background linked her to Jimran. Her marriage could become a bridge, but bridge also placed between two sides. They may pull in different directions. She had to carry loyalty and her husband without pretending that the earlier family tried to disperse emotional burden for Nilupar and Asporka, but the larger questions remain similar. How does a woman connected to politicals and world keep the identity without becoming a tool or older side? The show women were most effective when their problem came from these conflict or duty love family political conflict of duty love family political origins motherhood and personal honors frequently move is honors frequently opposite directions. Nilufar could love Orhan still oppose his political marriage. Asporka could understand Orhan will still exempt an expansion sports Aladdin and the destroy by hidden identity claim could spot the state compassion and still identity spots compassions she does not would not be sent into danger. Durjan's story developed inside this world of uncurtains loyalty executions around him placed Helmi is fleeting to behind them become a personal betrayal if new was family and the state. Helmi did not possess Orhan military power and she faced a decision that required equal courage and political world around he was calling him a traitor. This kind of accusation is one of the strongest weapons in a place. A sword kill the body, and the world trailer destroy relationship and tries is complete. Pupils become afraid to speak to the accused. All actions and examines in the worst possible way. Even silence begins to look suspicious, and the story around Darshan showed how enemies could use uncertainty to weaken the stake from within. They did not always need to defeat Orhan's soldiers, and the story did not could him family and commanders doubt one and others. By episode 20, Orhan had reached and others major decisions. He moved against Sahinsa's camp while Sahinsas and determined prepared a deadly trap. It was caught in the fire of revenge. Everyone asked to marry Fatima, and Orhan decided that a strong alliance with the Emperor required him to marry Asporka. The official episode summary presented this decision as a response to several threats and asked how Nilufar would react to the political marriage. This was one of the closest moments. Was Oran chose the state over personal peace? He understood that he the silence against enemy, but he also knows the decisions would wound Nilufar. Our careless rulers might pretended that the pain did not matter. A weak ruler might embarrass the alliance because he feared conflict at home. Orhan tried to hold both responsibility, and that is exactly why the situation became difficult. There was no solutions without a prize. The marriage decisions also shows the limit of political power. Orhan could order soldiers to move. He could sign an agreement. He could accept a marriage of the state. What he could not was orders Nilufar not to feel hurt. Authority can control public actions, but it cannot command the private hurt. The frustrations with Nilufar some time came from expecting he to understand the divisions at a political necessity. She understood that the political her pain come from understanding it too well. She knew that this would not be to the last time. The state demanded something from their marriage. Asporka also paid a price. It would be unfair to describe her simply as the woman who benefited from Orhan's political choice. She entered a palace where many people dangerous to Nilufar positions. She had to live among former enemies, accept a marriage shaped by strategy, and prove that she was not security waiting to harm the Ottoman state. Even if the marriage is increased her formal status, it also reduced her personal freedom. She became part of an alliance whose success depended on her behavior. The most interesting possibility in this plot was that Orhan and Sporka might develop real respect after beginning without romantic love. This does not make Nilufar's suffering unimportant. It makes the situations more complicated. Political marriage can create emotional bonds over time because people share dangers, responsibility, and daily life. If Orhan remained completely cold toward Asporga, the relationship would feel because if he grew close to her, places and conflict would depend. The writers choose the second path, allowing the walls between them to weaken. Nilufer anger the then became sharper. She was no longer reacting only to an agreement written for political reasons. She could see signs that the relationship might become emotionally real. This changes her fear from temporary jealousy to questions about her futures. Would she remain Orhan closest companions? Would her son's position change? Would Asporka gain in Nilufar over military or diplomatic matters? Would the peoples begin dividing themselves between the two women? Episode 22 Palace displays tensions beside mothers and other expansions compassions. Orhan and Sporka marriage change the balance inside Bursa while Nilufar openly struggles with the result. At the same time, Orhan moved toward scenery near the Karachi border and faced a trap involving Sahin Saz, Determines and Mehmed Bey. The episode also continue and the dangers around Darshan and show Yigit moving toward revenge against Evron and Fatma. The scenery comparison was important because it showed that Orhan could not stop governing while the household was in conflict. A ruler does not receive a quiet week to solve his marriage problems before returning to the borders. The state continue moving enemies, continue planning soldiers wait for orders. Orhan had to carry emotional pressure into military decisions without allowing it to damage its judgment. This is one of the hidden costs of leadership. The rulers may be angry, tired, giving, or confused, but the army still accepts clarity. Boran and Curity sentence presence in the compassion connected Orhan age and the earlier generation. These warriors carried memories of Osman struggles and had survived many enemies. Their loyalty gave Orhan historical spot when experienced Arabs rode beside him. They assured others that the new ruler had not completely broken from the founder circles. At the same time, Orhan could not depend on the presence forever. Part of this task was to raise new um, commanders who begins fully to the period. Evron became especially useful in the development. His path represented the way a state expand through people as well as same place as the old Kai warriors. This identity and history made some people suspicious, yet its serious could make him part of Orhan future. The growing Ottoman state needed men who chooses loyalty through actions. If he accepted only those words, Boran inside one tribe, it could capture territory but would struggle to govern a wider population. His wish to marry Fatma gave this political idea a personal from marriage into the ruler's family would mean full acceptance, but it would also place everyone under greater examinations. Every action would be studied. Any mistake might be used. State that Orhan had trusted understood that their relationship could no longer remain private. Their marriage could become a message about who has allowed to enter the heart of the destiny. Molan response mattered for this reason. This was not simply a mother deciding whether she liked the man chosen by her daughters. She had to think about family safety, political symbolisms, Iran record, and Fatma happiness. A refusal could protect the family from risk but response family wounds. Acceptance could strengthen loyalty but angers traditions figures who already feared change. The decisions required the same balance between old and new that shaped Orhan rule. They repeatedly attacked on Fatma. The Iran show how dangerous their union was to those who wanted divisions. Igit anger, Sahinsa's ambition, and the false stories around evils are pushed the couples apart. Their enemies understood that destroying trust between them could also create conflict between Orhan and his sisters. This is how personal relationship becomes political target. A wedding can unite groups so an enemy tries to turn it into a scandal. Episode 24 intensified almost every unresolved problem as Porca returns to the palace, renew her conflict with Nilufar Orhan threatening the emperor over Isnik Fatma Nivram prepared for wedding but an unexpected woman and child created a crisis. Sainsas and determined continue planning against Orhan while Darshan's fed death is front of Helmi. The arrivals of a woman and a child at the Ebron's honor at the worst possible problems. Public shares is often more demanding than a private accusations because it's spread because the excuse can answers a celebration give the enemy a larger audience instead of allowing Fatma and Ibrahim to begin their marriage with the trust that the plot forced them into another test. Fatma had to decide whether the parents of evidence was stronger than everything she knows about Iran's. This type of twist can be exciting, but it also risks executing the audience when used too often. Fatma and Iran had already crossed identity problems, political opposition, suspicions, and violence, and other sudden accusations increased tensions. Yet it also delayed the emotional reward of their reunion. A longer season could spot such repeated obstacles because she a longer seasons could spot such repeatedly upscales because the relationship would have more quiet sense between them. In our 26 episode story, every new bearers used time that might have been spent showing their growth as a couple. The same issue appeared in the Nilufar and Sporga conflict. Their disagreement contained deep political and emotional material, but it was sometimes expressed mainly through direct confrontations. The stronger sense where each woman's positions could be understood without one become completely cruel. Nilufar was not wrong to fear losing influence, and love as Porca was not wrong to demand dignity inside a marriage and place. She had entered the political reasons. Orhan was not wrong to seek an alliance. but he often underestimated the lasting emotional cost. A more patient version of the story could have shown the woman influencing different parts of the state. Niloufar might have focused on the palace, household, public charity, education, or the protections of Orhan's sons. Sporka might have used knowledge of the Byzantine courts, diplomacy, language, and noble families. Their competition could then more than a fight for Orhan attention. It could become a struggle between two political workers, uh, each claiming to protect the state in different way. The library also raised questions about Orhan fairness. It is easy for our rulers to speak about justice in public. The true test comes inside his own home. Could he hear Nilufar pain without dismissing it is jealousy? Could he defend Spolka from unfair treatment without making Nilufar feel replaced? Could he prevent servant commanders and relatives from forming groups around each woman? A division's palace can quickly produce a divided court, especially even when suspicious succession is involved. Orhan's threat to the emperor over Iznik showed her side of the diplomacy. He was no longer asked for, recognized as the son of Osman. He was speaking as a ruler strong enough to connect the emperor's safety with the surrender of a strategic city. This was not the language of a small borders based seeing permissions. It was the language of a growing power that can understood the weakness of the other side. Iznik and Ismail presented more than future conquest. They were part of the road system, the political balance around Byzantine territory and the larger movement toward Constantinople. By turning his attentions toward them, Orhan showed that Bursa was now the final dream. Every capture created new borders. Every new border created another target. Expansion could protect the state by pushing enemies farther away, but it also created long line to defend. This is one reason Orhan needed alliances even when he did not trust the people, offering them a ruler surrounded by enemies could not fight everyone at the same time. He may make peace with one power is order to face and others. He may marry into a family whose interests remain different from his own. He may promise temporary smiles. He may sports while preparing for the possibility that the agreement will fail. Diplomacy is not always the final chapters, the real update, and the meaning of Krulus or Han. Some stories end with a victory, some end with a death, and some end with a questions that stay alive after the screen becomes dark. Krulus or Han choose the third part. The latest confirmed update is no longer about a coming episode, a new trailer on or a secret cast entry. The first season ended with episode 26 on June 10, 2026, and the productions presented that episode as the final chapter of the series. After the broadcast, producers and writers Mehmet Bozak described the writer's journey that begins with Delirious Ertugrul and continues through Krulus Orhan, Osman and Krulus Orhan as a completed story of 37 episodes. He also thanked the audience and said that new epics would come in a new periods. That statement changes the whole conversations around the show. Fans are not waiting for episode 27, they are now trying to understand why the story closed too quickly, what the final screen means, whether the door is truly closed for Orhan, and what kind of historical drama may come from next. The strongest way to understand the ending is to look at the journey of Orhan himself. When he entered the story, he was not simply another warrior carrying a famous name, he carried the heavy result of everything his family has built. Ertugrul had protected our tribe when survival itself was uncertain. Osman had turned that tribe into a political power and laid the foundations of a state. Orhan received something different. He did not receive an empty field where he could build freely. He received cities, soldiers, enemies, law, family expectations, and a growing state that could no longer act like a small tribe. This made his challenge quieter but more complex. His task was to only conquer. His task was to organize conquest, protect the people living under his rule, control powerful commanders, manage places tension, and keep the dream of his fathers alive without becoming only a copy of him. The series often worked best when it showed this pressure on Orhan's shoulders. The final episode threw that pressure into the one great political and military test. The Emperor and Sahinsas moved to trap Sultan Orhan between two enemies. A force of 8,000 soldiers was coming from Constantinople while another danger was rising close to Orhan land. The plan was simple in idea but deadly in practice. Divide Orhan's attentions, force him to fight on two sides, and destroys his strength before his foot chooses the ground of battles. Orhan answers with a plan of his own instead of waiting for the enemy fleet to leave Karasai port. He aimed to destroy the ships before they could sail. This was not only an action scene designed for excitement, it showed the kind of rulers Orhan has become. He understands that a war can be won before two armies fully meet. He looked at movement, transport, timing, supply, fear, and surprises. A sword may defeat a man, but strategy defeats an army. The final chapter wanted to leave the evidence with that image of Orhan, not merely a brave fighter but a louder leader who could see the whole aboard. This difference between courage and command is one of the most useful ideas in the series. Many historical dramas make every hero prove himself by entering the center of every fight. Kurulus Orhan also gave its two heroes many physical battles, but the deeper question was whether he could become a ruler who chooses decisions, carries to live, risk for honors. A sultan must measure the price of that risk for the plan represent a bravery to state thinking. He was still the man who could ride into the dangers, yet he had learned that is not always the blade in this hand. Sometimes it the message sent it the right or the road closed before the enemy arrives, the soldiers hidden where no one expects him, or the ship burned before it becomes part of a larger attack. The final, therefore, thread planning as a form of heroism is suggested that the future's Ottoman's power would grow not only because its warriors were fearless but because its leaders learned how to turn limited strength into a larger result. Saints serve as the opposite image of Orhan. Both men wanted power, both could inspire fighters, and both were ready to shape the futures The difference was the person's reasons behind their ambitions. Orhan ambitions was try to a state a duty as a vision that has passed through generations. Sansa's ambitions was tied more closely to himself. His anger grew until he was willing to burn relationship, destroy trust, and place everyone around him in danger. In the final struggles, his action showed what happened when powerless moral directions. He did not become dangerous only because he had soldiers. He became dangerous because his desires had no final limit. A person who want one castle may stop after one castle. A person who want to prove that no one stand above him will never stop because a very successful man becomes a new insult in his eyes. Orhan had to defeat more the idea that leadership belongs to the loudest, agrees to most impatient man. The final conflict plays control purpose against uncontrolled hunger. The short treatment of the emperor followed another path. The emperor did not represent wild ambitions in the same way. He represented an all power trying to survive through pressure, a license number, and political trap. For him, Orhan was not simply a borders babe who could be ignored. Orhan has become a ruler capable of changing the balance of the regions. This is why the enemy plan involved a major force and careful attempt to place him between armies. The size of the response revealed the size of the threat. Orhan had become empires do not spend thousands of men because of a small problem. They send them when they fear that tomorrow may no longer belong to them. In the scenes, the final did not need a long speech to announce Orhan's success. The fear of his enemies announced it. When the strongest power around you changes its plan because of your movement, you have already entered history. The battlefield was therefore not only about survival, it was proof that the small frontier state had become impossible to overlook. At the same time, the final chapter did not allow war to occupy every part of the story. Bursa remained the emotional centers where personal wounds, love, family, angers, and futures. Hopes continued to move Fatma and the other returned safety, creating joy in the palace after a period of dangers. Ibrones was cleared of the blame that had darkened his name and the possibility of completing his unfinished relationship with Fatma returns. This plot carried a different kind of justice. On the battlefield, justice often arrives through victory. In a family or a relationship, justice arrives when the trust is finally heard. Ebron could fight enemies, but he could not force people to believe in his innocence. He needed the lie around him to collapse. Fatma also needed more than love. She needed a reason to trust again. Their reunion was meaningful because it was not built on a sudden changes of heart. It was built on the removal of a false story that had food stood between them. Fatma's journey matters because she was never only a romantic fight waiting for someone else to decide her life. She was part of a ruling family, and that position gave her strength as well as pain. Every personal choice could become a political matter, every friendship could be examined, every love could be used by enemies. When the suffers the damage did not remain private, it could enter the palace, divide loyalty and influence. They were commanders were treated. Her story with Evron showed how difficult love becomes when it lives inside a state under constant threat. A normal misunderstanding can be solved by a conversation. A misunderstanding involves treason's capacity or may we destroy Liz before the trust appears. The final episode offers them hopes, but that hope carried the memory of everything that they lost. It did not feel like the beginning of an easy life. It felt looks like two people receiving one more change after history and nearly taken that chance way. Everyone also represented transformations. He stood between identities, loyalty, and words, and his path made him one of the characters that united to the largest meaning of Orhan's state. A growing state cannot be built only by peoples who were present at the first empire. It must also make space for those who joined later, prove themselves, and chooses a new loyalty. Ebron's innocence was therefore more than a personal matter. It tested whether the court could recognize trust in some whose past made others suspicious. State becomes strongest when loyalty is judged through actions rather than blood alone. They become weaker when every newcomer is treated as a permanent stronger. The final resolutions around Ibron's justice that Orhan's world had to learn these lessons. If the Ottoman state was going to grow beyond one tribe, it needed a wider idea of belonging. A man could enter from another side of the borders and still become more faithful than someone born inside the tent. The conflict between Nilüfer and Sporka brought and other kind of struggles in the palace. Nilüfer learned that Sporka had killed Daphne and grief immediately changes the meaning of their rivalry. Daphne had become a threat, yet she was still Nilüfer's sister. This is where simple ideas of good and evil become difficult. A person may know that a relative has become wrong and still feel the pain of losing that relative's blood does not disappear because trust becomes ugly. Nilufer angers was not proof that she supported Daphne action. It was proof that grief does not follow the clean logic of a court decisions. Esporca may have believed she had removed our dangers, but Nilufer received the news as a sister before he should receive it as a political figure. The final episode used this tension to show that protecting the state can create wounds inside the same palace that benefits from the protections. Nilufer's position had always demanded more than calm world and a noble appearance. She had to live between her earlier identity and the life she chose beside Orhan. She had to carry love, motherhood, loss, and public responsibility. At the same time, her anger toward Esporca came from a palace where all those roles met. As a leading woman of the state, she had to understand why threats could not be ignored as a sister. She could not expect definite death without pain. As Orhan partner, she had to avoid turning private grief into a danger for the court. These duties pulled her in different directions. That conflict gave her character's weight. A ruler's wife is a historical drama can easily become someone who only received news from the battlefield. Nilufer's was more interesting when the battlefield entered her own heart and forced her to make decisions no sword could solve. Esporca, on the other side, represented the called cost of actions. She did what she believed was unnecessary, but necessary actions do not always bring peace. Sometimes they end one danger and create another. This is a lesson that belongs to politics as such as family life. A person can remove an enemy and still lose the trust for an ally. Sporka conflict with Nilufars therefore raised a questions that final do not have enough time to fully answer. How can two powerful women share a palace when each believes she has protected it in a different way? One protects through emotional loyalty and the desires to hold the family together. The other protects through direct actions, even when that actions leaves blood behind. Neither method is enough by itself. A palace ruled only by emotions becomes open to manipulation. A palace rules only by hard decisions becomes a place without trust. The trust challenge was not deciding which woman was completely right, it was finding whether their opposite strength could ever exist without destroying each other's. Helemi's story brought the shadow of possible death into the final chapter. She had been waiting to meet Darshan again, but news for what happens to his threatening to turn hope into mourning. Her pain carried the family curative of war. The peoples waiting behind the cannot see. Soldiers know the dangers before them. The ones who loves them lives between silence and rumors. Every ounce entering the gate man carry a wounded man, a message or a final piece of cloth. Helmi fears sure that human prize hidden behind a large wounds like conquest, victory, and a destiny. A map can change in one night, but the empty place at our family tables may remain for a time life by placing her personal crisis beside the personal preparations for a huge war. The episode reminds viewers that history is not made only by rulers, it is only felt by sisters, wives, mothers, and children who must wait while decisions are made for from them. Darshan's uncertain fate also survived our dramatic purpose. The final episode ended both complications and opens emotions. If every relationship had been solved with perfect happiness, the constellations would have felt too clean for a world built on sacrifice. It every relationship had needed in tragedy. The series would have denied the hope that has always driven its heroes. Helemi's stories stood between those two, and it kept the audience aware that victory never removes all pain. Even when Orhan defeats a military plan, he cannot command life and death. That limit is important. A hero who can control everything becomes less human. Orhan was determined belief because fate could still break the plan of good people. The state could grow while one heart will shatter. The flag could rise while one family waited for a man who might never return. History often moves forward. It's exactly this painful way Bursa's role in the final deserves special attention. Earlier in the wider story, Bursa has a dream, a target, and a symbol of the future. By the time of Krulus Orhan, it had become of seat of rule and center of family life and a place where the state had to prove that conquest could turn into orders. Capturing a city is a moment governors A city is a long test. The finale episode showed Bursa preparing for total war. It is also showed people returning, relationship changing, news spreading, and place tension shaping decisions. This made the city feel more than prize. It became a living place. Orhan achievement was not only that he could never Bursa, his achievement was that Bursa would become the heart from which new plans were made. A conquerors take a great part of a larger future. The line connected with the final promotions. We were a tribe searching for a homeland. We become a state captures the central movement of the entire saga. The sentence looks simple, but it describes a deep changes in identity. A tribe is held together mainly by blood, memory, customs, and direct loyalty. Its two leaders, a state must hold together people who many know share the same family, language, background, or earlier history. It needed rules that continue when the leader is absent. It needed official soldiers, judge, markets, taxes, roads, agreements, and a large idea of justice. Orhan stood at the point where the old tribal spirit could not be abandoned, but it also could not be the only system he held to protect the fire of the sky while building some things wide enough for cities and new communities. This is why his history story could be only Krulus or Han with a younger face. The series can sometimes move very fast through this stage and the created both energy and weakness. We will receive battles, places, conflict, betrayals, romantic tensions, and new enemies in a short season. The advantage was that almost every episode carried a major event. The disadvantage was that some ideas needed more space than 26 episodes could give them. Orhan development from Prince to Sultan Nilufar's places in the palace, Asporka role Evron's transformation, Sahinsa's falls, and the wider Byzantine struggles could each have spotters long across because the ending arrived quickly. The finale had to complete several emotions stories while also creating a major war and closing our 12 years television journey. That is a very heavy task for one chapter. The episode therefore felt less like the end of the one moral season and more like the closing for a large look when several pages were still full of possibilities. This does not mean the ending had to power. In fact, its speed gave it strange emotional force. Fans entered the season expecting the beginning of Orhan role, but the story became a farewell before many had accepted that it was ending. That gap between expectations and reality changes the way every final scene was viewed. A victory was not only a victory, it was one of the last victories. A family reunion was not only a reunion, it was a final image of characters we might never see again. A mentions of the tensions. Target was not only a promise, it was a road the series itself would not travel. The audience had to imagine the futures rather than watch it. For some viewers, that created disappointment. For others, it gave the ending legendary qualities. F. It's Orhan and the writers continue behind the frame. The final time jump made that feelings even stronger instead of staying only is Orhan lifetime. The closing scenes is only Orhan lifetime. Closing scenes move forward to the intergenous period and age connected with Celebi Mehmet and the young Mjord. A trailer scored the prince about the earlier time of Sultan Orhan thinking past victories to a later moment of crisis and renewals the question about whether a second resurrection was still for away changes the ending from a simple consolation into a bridge. It suggests that states are not built once. They can weaken, divide, and require a new generations to gather them. Broken pieces or handwork was therefore presented as one stage is a repeating historical duty. Ertugrul protected the root, Osman established the trunk, Orhan wind the branches. Later, rulers would face storms that demanded another kind of beginnings. This idea of a second resurrection is the most important clue in the latest update. It could not be treated as a confirmed death from a new series because the production has not publicly announced a direct continuations with a full cast release date or broadcast plan. However, it clearly works as a creative single. Mehmet Bozag farewell message also said that audience should be ready for new epics in a new periods. When these 2 points are placed together, the safest consolation is that the Orhan chapters is complete, but the producers is interested is telling that historical stories the futures may move to another Ottoman ruler, another centers, or a different hero entirely. What is confirmed is the end of this 370 episode journey. What remains uncertain is the exact identity of the next journey. Fans should separate those two facts so that hope does not turn into false news. This distinction matters because historical drama communities often fill silence with rumors or costumes. Photograph becomes proof of a new seasons and actors following a producers become a secret casting announcement and all interview is sharing with a new date. A fan posters is presented as an official design. Krulus Orhan has already attracted this kind of supplications because viewers do not want to accept that such a large story can end after one season under its new name. The best way to follow the situation is simple. Official statement from ATV Bozag Film, Mehmet Bozag, and the verified series accounts should carry more weight than channels that use dramatic titles without evidence. At present, the official language is about complications and futures, a period of new epics, not episode 27 or a confirmed second season that may change one day, but it has not changed yet. The end of Krulus Arhan also invites comparisons with the transitions from Dirilis Ertugrul to Krulus Osman. That earlier transitions had a clear dramatic logic. Ertugrul missions created the conditions for Osman, and Osman life naturally offered a new foundation story. The transitions of Orhan was more difficult because the audience has spent 6 seasons with one leader actors and one center's hero. Changing the title, the cast balance, and the style of leadership out at once required viewers to form a new emotional bond. Some expected Mert Orhan as a fresh ruler with his own energy. Others continue to measure every scene against Burak Ostrich Osman. The comparisons was understandable, but it also made Orhan task harder. A successor character must honor the past while proving that he is not merely an echo. The series began this work, yet its short run limited how fully it could complete it. Mud performance approach Orhan with our different rhythms. His versions carries youth, speed, tough, and the tension of a man who has inherited greatness before he had enough time to live outside its shadow. He does not need to copy Osman voices, postures, or anger. In fact, copying would have weakened the character's one strength came from showing another form of command. He could be direct in battles, but his larger identity was tied to calculations and expansions. The final war plan supported this reading. It gave the actors a chance to present authority through decisions rather than only through physical dominance. Even viewers who has mixed feeling about the seasons could see the direction the characters was moving toward. A ruler whose victories could depend increasingly on institutions, commander, diplomacy, and long planning. Nilüfer plays beside Orhan also offered a part that could have grown ever several seasons. Their partnership was not only a romance, it carried the meeting of different cultural worlds and the buildings of a new political household. Nilüfer personal loses her family connections and her responsibility inside Bursa gave her many possible directions. She could have become a central figure in shaping court, culture, protecting successions, managing rivalries, and serving as bridge between communities. The final showed her still caught in pain and conflict, especially after definite death. This is why her ending feels emotionally unfinished, even if the series itself is officially complete. The characters reach an important positions, but viewers were left to imagine how she would grow into it. Asporka path was equally open. Her clash with Niloufar could have become a serious study of power inside an early royal household. Too often, historical series reduced women conflict to jealousy over a man. Krulus Orhan had the material to be beyond that. The deeper struggle was about security, influence, motherhood, loyalty, and different ideas of what the state needed. As Porka could be hard without begins empathy. Nilufar could be compassionate without being weak. Their choices could affect alliances and the futures of their destiny. The final episode placed them in a sharp emotional confrontations but did not have the time to show the lasting result. This unfinished tensions is one reason fans continue to discuss the series. The ending closed the broadcast, but it do not close every emotional arguments. The same is true for Fatma and Evron's. Their reunion offered relief, yet their futures could not have been simple. Evron's past and his place among Orhan commanders could continue to create suspicious. Fatma position in the dynasty could turn their marriage into a political symbol. Together they could present the state ability to bring former outsider into its deepest circle. They could also become target for those who believe blood matters, who that serve the final gave them the chance to begin again. But the most interesting part of the stories and most have been what came after forgiveness. Trust is not rebuilt is one conversation, it is rebuilt through repeated joys. A longer series could have shown how love survived after public shame, false blame, and political use. Helmy Anderson's offers and other wrote the audience was asked the complete in imaginations. Their relationship carried tenderness, waiting, and that dangers that follow anyone tied to war. Whether Dorshan's returns or became a Midroy, Helmy would have changed. Joy would have required healing, loss would have required a new purpose. In Ether's case, the story could have shown how women of the Rallying happy after the song of a victory ended. Historical drama often give their man gives journey after pain but move quickly past the grief of women. Helmy final fears had the power to open a more serious emotional chapter. Instead, it became part of the large collections of possibilities left behind by the final. Osman legacy remained present even when he was not physically at the center. Orhan choices were always judged against the state his fathers and founded. This is both a gift and a prison for any successors. The founders can break all the rules because he is creating a new order. The son must prove that he is worthy of what already exists. If he changes too much, people say the betrayal. The father, if he changes too little, the state may stop growing. Orhan true battles was therefore not only against Byzantine forces or internal rivals, it was against the fear of becoming either a weak copy or an ungrateful successor. The best moment of the series show him finding a third path, respecting Osman's directions while using new method for a larger world. This theme connects directly to the final time jump. Celebi, Mehmed, and Murad also stood beneath the weight of earlier rulers. The Ottomans. In Grams was a period was unity had broken and the futures was uncontained by moving from Orhan age to dead crisis. The series suggested that every generation received both an inheritance and a test. A strong inheritance does not remove danger, sometimes it creates a larger responsibility. The young prince, listening to Orhan's story, was not being entertained, he was being prepared. History was present as a form of training. The victories of the past were useful only if gave courage and wisdom to someone facing a different kind of darkness. The phrase second expression also changes the meaning of the word establishment. Establishment sounds like a single event, as though a state is founded on one day and the continue forever. Real struggles, less stable institutions can fail, brothers and can fight, armies can divide it, enemies can return. The spirit that established a state may need to be rediscovered. The finale therefore look beyond the popular image of non-stop expansions It admitted that the Ottoman story would include collapse, internal war, and rebuilding. This is a Richard's idea that a simple victory ending. It tells giver that greatness is not the absence of crisis. Greatness is the ability to risk against without forgetting why the state was built for. The audience is Pakistan and other countries where the cruelest words gained a passionate following. This ending carries a special emotional weight. Many viewers did not experience the series only as entertainment. They watched it with families, discussed its moral lessons, shared scenes online, learned names from history, and from strong attachment to actors or characters. The wider saga became part of weekly life. That is why the producers reference to 12 years and 370 episode matters. It recognized that the ending belongs not only as a Turkish television schedule but to an international community that travels from the tent of Ertugrul to the court of Orhan. The final message thanks viewers across many countries, showing that the productions understood the size of the bond, however long for series should not prevent honest crimes. Kurulus Orhan had two burdens of continuing one of the most recognizable historical television brand in the world. It needed to introduce a new lead, explain a changed political world, keep old viewers attract younger viewers, and create fresh enemies without repeating the same patterns. This was extremely difficult as time the series succeeded through strong visual scale, fast actions, and the idea of Orhan as a strategic ruler. As other time the numbers of plot competed for attention, palace conflict, secret identities, family grief, enemy license, romance, and major compassions sometimes moved so quickly that emotional consequence did not receive enough silence. A scene would create plan, but the next dangers arrived there before the pain could fully settle. The final episode inherited these problems because it has to finish Mithred at once. The villain also faced the challenge of follow memorable enemies from the earlier show. A strong historical villain needs more than cruelty, the needs a believable idea of the world. Science's came closest to this when his ambition exposed the dangers of personal power without duty. The Emperor represented the fear of an old order losing control. Daphne brought dangers into the family. Each threat came from a different direction, which gave the season variety. Yet a longer run could have allowed these forces to develop more impatiently, could have understood the imperial code, Sansa's porters, and Daphne's inner conflict in great depth. The final war then would have carried the weight of years rather than months. The material was present, time was the missing element. The production's choices to close the story after 26 episodes should therefore be understood of two leaves on the official attractive. creates level. Mehmet Bozak described the entire Artughul Osman Orhan journey as completed of the industry level reports before the final said the series would end with episode 26 and media discussions. Episode 26 also focused on audience performance and the channel futures plan. It is responsible to believe that both creative and business factors influence the decisions as they usually do is television. What should be avoiding is pretending that one uncomfort rumors explain everything unless the channel release detailed internal information. Outsiders cannot know every meeting, cost, contract, or target behind the ending. The honest statement is that the final is confirmed. The 370 episode saga is described and complete, and no second season has been officially announced. Fans who ask whether Skrulus or Han can return should remember that television's endings are sometimes permanent and sometimes not. A story may return through a special film, a new titles, and older visions of characters, or a future series that uses flashbacks, but possibility is not confirmation. The final scenes move to another hour may actually make a direct Orhan continuation less likely because is deliberately pressed past the historical torch toward the producer's word about new epics also wounds about new epic also winded than a promise to continue the same cast. The most realistic expectation is not episode 27, it is a future historical production that carries similar themes of faith, state, sacrifice, and renewals. Perhaps is different century if a new project follow the clue of the final time jump. Celebrity Mehmed figure his period offers exactly the kind of second establishment suggested by the ending. After divisions and civil war, he worked to reunite the Ottoman land and restore central power. A series about that age would not repeat Ertugrul or Osman. Instead of building a forum, a small tribe, the hero would interior a broken state. His enemies could include not only foreign power but rivals, claim executed enemies, communities demanded trust, and the memory of family conflict. The emotional questions would be different. Can a real can hate its own destiny has vast torn apart. This is and strong foundations for drama. A young Mehmed could then represent the next step. He would grow up hearing stories of earlier rulers while watching the difficult world of recovery. His journey could connect the first resurrections with later expansions, showing how memory becomes policy. The final question spoke to the daughters may have been designed preciously to create this sense of a future hero waiting beyond the frame. Still, the audience should treat this as interpretations, not an official announcement. The scenes opens our door is imagination. It does not yet place a date on the calendars, and others possible direction is that the productions may leave the Ottoman line for a time and explore a different Turkish or Islamic historical figure. Mehmed Buzag's use of the phrase new epics allow a wide range of choices. A new project could focus on commanders, rulers, or spiritual leaders, or a period that has not received the same level of television attention. This could be creatively held. The Krulus formula has great strength, but repeating the same borders, battles, hidden trailers, and players' rivals forever would reduce their effect. A new period would allow different customers, costumes, political system, geography, and type to conflict. It could preserve the moral energy of the earlier show while avoiding direct comparisons with beloved characters. Whatever next, Cruel's Arhan probably be remembered as a bridge rather than a full era. Release Artugul has 5 seasons to create its world. Cruel's Orhan has 6 seasons to show a founder's long struggles. Cruel's Orhan had 1 season and 26 episodes. That difference will always shape the way people judge it. It did not have enough time to become a deep in public memory as the earlier show. Yet bridges are important even when people cross them quickly. The series moved the saga from foundations to organized statehood. It showed that the dream did not end with Osman raised a flag. It had to be carried, changed, and protected by his sons. The ending also protect one important trust about Orhan image. He was a builder of systems as much as a man of war. The television story used dramatic inventions as historical drama always do, but its best directions was toward administrations, planning, and expansions. A long running version of the series could have explored her education, trade, military organizations, urban life, and the growing complexity of Ottoman's rule. The final war plan offered a small image of his larger potential. Orhan understood sports, fluids, trough movement, and timing. He was thinking beyond the next duel. That is key difference between leading a band of warriors and directing a state. The title Krulus Orhan may now seem unusual because Krulus or establishment is most directly connected with Osman, yet the final episode and other my meanings founding is not finished. Is that establishment of industrial state first body. Orhan had teach that body how to grow. The interpretations also explain why the palace stories were not separate from the military story. A state can defeat an external army and still collapse from inner divisions. Nilufar and the Sporka conflict, Fatma and Ebron's broken trust, Helimi fears, and Sainsa's ambitions all showed threat to unity at different levels. The palace was another battlefield, but its weapons were rumors, grief, suspicious, blood tides, and influence. Orhan could not solve those problems by sending ups. He needed judgment, patience, and the ability to hurt people who were hurting. The final did not fully show him resolving every personal crisis, but it made clear that his rule, depending on more than military access. A useful way to read the final episode to see every man plot a test of unity. The Emperor of Sahinsas tried to between two fronts Daphne dead divisions, Nilufar and Esporca. False blame divisions divided Fatima and Iviron's Esporca, the uncurtained faith of Darshans threatening to divide her from reality for Helmi. The larger time jump shot and Ottoman's futures divided by civil conflict. Against all these divisions stood the idea of resurrections, bringing scattered forces, wounded relationship, and broken land back into one direction. This shared theme gave the final more united than its more plots. First suggests the final image did not promise that unity would last forever. It promised that the memory of unity could help rebuild it. This is a more mature message than saying the heroes who had everything remained perfect. No state is protected from human weakness. Ambitions can return in every generation. Brothers can become rivals, chord groups, and chooses themselves over the larger community. Foreign power can use internal crack. The only lasting depth is a political culture strong enough to remember its purpose. The tutor stories about Orhan served that purpose from the young prince. It kept the founding values alive when the state needed them again. For viewers, the same idea works on an emotional level. The series has ended, but its effect continues through memory, discussions, clip review, and the lessons people took from it. Television show does not need a new episode. It's someone the conversation between becomes more serious after the ending because viewers are no longer rushing towards the next trailers. They can ask which characters were understood, which plot was rushed, what the show said about leadership, and the why curtain scenes stayed in the mind. Krulus Orhan may gain a different kind of appreciation with the time, especially from viewers who watch the full reasons without the pressure of weak expectations. The most final judgment is neither blood raised nor easily dismissed. The series was ambitious. It tried to carry a huge legacy through a major cast and title changes. It offered a younger storage hero, a larger court, new emotional tensions, and a model moving from tribal rule towards state powers. It also needed before many of those ideas could reach rather than strength. Episode 26. Friendship, often it is careful management of dangers. Sciences never expected this larger political method. His world was based more strongly on visible power, terrible authority, and direct control. Orhan use of foreign alliances and new people threatening men like him because it changed the source of influence. A traditional way could dominate when women's power depended mainly on his tribe and warriors. He became less central when the state built cities, court alliances, and a wider administrations. His resistance before came from both pride and fear of becoming unnecessary. This does not excuse his betrayal, but it helps explain why he continued even after the damage became obvious. He may was not only trying to defeat Orhan, he was trying to stop a political world in which Orhan's style of leadership would replace his own. Every success of the new state became proof that the old balance would not return. Instead of adapting, he chooses destructions. Dimran licenses him his own show. Restaurant can create temporary partnership. Peoples who may not completely trust one another can still cooperate when they shares can such a license and dangerous because they are held together by the haters rather than a positive goals. If Orhan had been moved, Sainzaz and Iran might soon have turned against each other. Their unity exists only while they could blame in his their failures. Orhan repeatedly survivals of traps to war show his growing ability to control internal war fighting and external enemy is often easier because the lines are clear. Internal enemies understand your customs, road commanders, and family weakness. They know which manage will causes panic and which persons can be pressures. Orhan had to protect the state without making every disagreement look like treason. If he became too suspicious, he could punish loyal men. If he remains too disgusting, betrayal could eat the palace. The final episode placed him between his internal threat and the Imperial Army. Episode 25 showed Orhan preparing move toward Iznik and Izmit while understanding that the new Empire was targeting him. Sainzas also attacked Orhan unity, making the coming conflict both internal and internal. This was the correct final test for the season because it combined for the two forms of dangers that had followed Orhan from the beginning. The emperor represented the military and political power outside the state. Sainzas represented the ambitions and divisions without it. Defeating only one could not be enough. If Orhan defeated the foreign army but allowed rebellions to grow, the state could collapse from inside. If he punished Sainzas but ignored the imperial Bursa and the frontiers could be attacked. Episode 26 then revealed then the full plans against them. The Imperial and Sainzas attempt to trap between two armies influence a force of weight thousand men coming from Constantinople. Orhan planted to destroy the ships at Karasai port before they can would sail, while Bursa prepared for a major battle. The official ATV page marked this as the final episode of Krulus Orhan. The decisions to burn these ships before dispute completed Orhan development as a strategic earlier is the seasons. He often has to prove his courage directly. In the final, he proved that he could prevent the enemy from using its full strength. He did not wait proudly for 8,000 soldiers to arrive simply so that he could calm or more dramatic victory. He looked for the weakest point in their movement and chose to strike there. This is an important leadership lesson. A brave commander may want the largest possible battles because victory will increase his fame. A responsible ruler wants to reduce the number of his own produced people who must die. Destroying the enemy transport is less glorious than defeating thousands face to face, but it is smarter. Orhan's final plan showed that he had learned to value result above personal display. It also showed that he was thinking about geography. Karasai port was not only a background location, control of the sea, ships, and movement was becoming more important as the state expanded. The early Ottoman struggles could not remain limited to horses, planes, and castles. Post connected armies, trade, and imperial power. Trade and imperial rulers who ignored the sea would allow the Byzantine side of move face around him. The ship therefore represented the change scale of Orhan world. Osman's story has often focused on frontier castles and tribal alliances. Orhan's story was moving toward cities, coasts, imperial armies, and more complex logistics. The final plan gave viewers a glimpse of the larger series. Cruise Orhan could have become it is had continued for several seasons. The battles also forced Orhan to trust others. A ruler cannot personally stand at the spot, guard Bursa, watch Sahinsas, protect the palace, and lead every group for soldiers. He must divide responsibility. This is where the quality of commanders becomes essential. Choosing the wrong man may destroy the plan. Refusing to delegate may slow every actions or harm. Success dependent on turning individual loyalty into an organized command systems. The old Arabs had to accept orders from a younger rulers. New commanders had to earn their place beside famous veterans. Family members had to perform duties without excusing their blood gave them special protection. These relationships were the real machinery of the state. Flag and titles were visible, but trust allowed the systems to move. Fatma and Evron's final joy also completed one part of his idea. The official ATV site released a special scenes connected with their happiest day during the final episode. Their union represented a reward after repeated tests, but it also showed Orhan world becoming wider. Evron was no longer standing at the edge of acceptance. Through loyalty and marriage, he became connected to the ruling family. Their happiness gave emotional relief before the story closed. After so much suspicion, Fatma finally received a moment that was not controlled by hidden identity or public accusations. Evron received recognitions that could not be easily taken away. The wedding suggested that trust has survived long enough to defeat the stories designed to separate them. Yet their end it also felt like the beginning of the and other chapters. Marriage would not remove every doubt around Ibron. It would create new duties. He would be expected to protect Fatma's son Orhan and prove that his place in his family made him more responsible rather than more powerful. Fatma would have to balance her role as Orhan's sister with her loyalty to her husband. Helmi and Darshan remain closest to tragedy. Their story reminds viewers that the finale could not reward every character equally. War leaves some people celebrating and others waiting for news. Orhan victory could protect Bursa without protecting every individual warrior. This difference prevented the ending from becoming a simple festival. Halloween's fears also reveal the part of conquest that official ceremonies often hide. When rulers announce a new target, families understand that someone must ride it toward it. A new borders means new guards, a new compassion means empty rooms. The dream of the state is carried through a private sacrifice. Halimi stood for everyone who loved soldiers, history remembered only by numbers. The tensions between Nilufar and Sporka reach its final stage through definite death. The trust that Sporka has killed Daphne placed Nilufar between political understanding and the pain of her sisters. Daphne may have become a threat, but grief does not disappear. When the dead person had made dangerous choices, Nilufar's response came from a wound that no explanations could immediately heal. Sporka's actions reflected her belief that dangers require a direct answer. She had been trained in a political world where hesitations could lead to death from the leaf from weavers. Removing Daphne may prove have been necessary to protect Orhan place, yet she also needed to understand that necessity does not remove consequence. Nilufar would not look at Daphne only as an enemy. She would remember childhood family and the persons her sister and once been. This conflict could have spotted an entire second season. Nilufar might have demanding justice as Porka might have defending his actions as several the state. Orhan would have been forced to decide whether a politically necessary killing could still be punished because of how it was carried out. Mulhan might have give to try prevent the place from dividing. The phase that series ended at this point leave the argument open. We do not see the long process of forgiveness, punishment, or separations. This is one of the best emotional gaps created by the finals. The military struggles reached a conclusion, but the palace entered a new crisis just as story stopped. This unfinished feeling appears in several plots. Orhan had become Sultan, but viewers did not see the long development of his roles. Nilufar had gained a central position, but her response to the changing places remained unresolved. As Porka moved from enemy to wife and ally, yet the complete meaning of her loyalty and still developing. Aladdin and Gonka had a future family to raise. Fatma and Ibron were only beginning married life Helmi happening remain uncertain. The series